Hi, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of Meet the Esop Company. I'm your host, Carrie Siggins. I am a commissioner on Governor Polis's Commission for Employee Ownership, and I'm also the CEO of Stone Age, which is an employee-owned company in Durango. And today I have Dan Luzetti with me, who's the CFO at Hercules, and we are going to chat with him about their ESOP. So Dan, thanks for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right. So what inspired you to begin considering employee ownership?
The idea of a legacy. So, Hercules Industries is a steel fabricator and wholesale distributor in the HVAC space. And we've been so for 60 plus years. And we've only been an ESOP for two of those 60. So, prior to that, it was a family owned business. We had grown in size to where kind of a traditional passing of the crown wasn't in the cards. So, I was lucky enough to kind of tag along for the process and watching all of our former owners sit in rooms with arms crossed and just kind of not happy with proceedings as we heard from private equity, we heard from strategic buyers and brokers, et cetera. And they literally just kind of melted and leaned forward as we finally got to an ESOP potential. And we had no idea what it was. And the more we learned about it, the more viable it got, the more excited our former owners got, in that they really felt, well, I think proud is the right word, to be able to leave the legacy they built over those 50 plus years to really the people who got them there.
Did you consider other employee ownership structures besides an ESOP? And what made you ultimately decide that that was the correct structure for you?
Yeah, we quickly came to the conclusion. I suppose they were considered, but quickly came to the conclusion of we're 100% ESOP. And I think it was once the avenue of that legacy passing kind of was shown the way, it was kind of a how can we make this happen? And the transaction was very definitive in the format we chose. Um, there was stability, I think, that we appreciated in the ESOP. Again, kind of just cemented all the details for us, I suppose.
So, as you've transitioned from a family owned company to an ESOP, how have you been promoting the whole idea of the ownership mindset amongst your employees?
Sure. Good question. We've tried a lot of stuff, some successful, some maybe not so successful. We immediately created an employee ownership communications committee, and that helped us with messaging, with events. And that committee included all kind of walks of the company, from tenured employee to fairly new employee to positions throughout the company. So they were kind of given free reign to what the equivalent of our marketing campaign looked like, what the events looked like. The biggest pushes obviously were around we've only had two share reveal events of after our annual evaluations. Those were by far the biggest events that were celebrated, I suppose. We created a couple training videos around, we call them a Herculade stand, and it's just taking lemonade stand basics into what we do. And hopefully, with everyone learning how basic manufacturing and distribution business works, we're encouraging people to kind of put on those ownership glasses in the roles they're in to say, hey, we can make improvements here, or if we do this a little different there. And again, I think with some momentum, we're starting to really see some fruits of those, both those, I guess, both the employee ownership communications committee and that ownership training.
So, being for family owned for 58 of your 60 years, was there any fear from employees of like, what does this mean if it's not family owned anymore, and how did you overcome that?
I think it was just fear of us surprise at first. I mean, it
Yeah,
had been a family-owned business for so long. It was holy smokes, we what?
yeah.
um, but after that time, I do think it was the way we picked the communications committee to where it really was a true representation of all roles, all varying types of employees. We immediately started begin sharing more information, and I think that kind of made it a little more tangible, a little more real for people. Um, And then I think we finally cemented it, I think with the first statements. Once people had their tangible piece of paper in their hand saying they owned that many shares, it was kind of the period on that sentence.
All right. So, what's one of the most surprising or significant benefits of employee ownership?
I would say so. We became an ESOP on October 1st of 2019. And it turns out probably like 4 or 5 months were enough to get our heads wrapped around that change of ownership. And then COVID came along and it was just a roller coaster for everybody. And knock on wood, we were extremely fortunate to be scooped up in the definition of essential. Our doors stayed open, everybody stayed at work. We have a rich culture of coming together, but that just felt very, very real
Yeah.
to where it was. Oh my gosh, the world is shutting down. What's going to happen to, I mean, 6 months later, holy smokes, we never stopped. How are we going to keep up with this so it was just all those starts and stops. And it is just that spirit of, it's almost like we renewed our entrepreneurial spirit. And it seems weird for a 58-year-old company to say that with 550 employees big, but it really was, it was the energizing spirit behind what we had to overcome in the past 2 years by far was.
So, what's one thing that you wish that you would have known before embarking on this employee ownership journey?
um, I would say post transaction ESOPs just carry a lot of details, all once they're known and you got your hands around it, are managed appropriately, etc. But I really wish I had the foresight to, I guess this is a cheesy answer, to know what I didn't know. um, so
Don't we
I think,
all?
yeah, right.
Why do you think someone should consider employee ownership?
I think there's a lot of consideration. I love the concept of employee ownership. And what I shared about how our people have rallied around the uncertainty of the past 2 years, the idea that there's now a vehicle to really reward the people doing the work. So, like I said, back to our legacy, where that's what the family ownership wanted, was to share this with their employees. Um, a vehicle of employee ownership is extremely powerful, and there's so many amazing stories of um, an entry level warehouse employee working his or her way up to upper management, executive management, and that journey leads to a very significant retirement savings account is just phenomenal. I just
Yeah.
love that component of it.
Thank you. All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show today, Dan. We really appreciate it.
Of course, thank you.